The Section Takeoff. Welcome to the Legacy Blues tutorial series. In this video, we'll cover the Section Takeoff maneuver from the Blue Angel No. 6 opposing solo perspective. The Section Takeoff is the first time the solos take the stage, and it's a dramatic entrance. While the lead solo performs a jaw-dropping, dirty roll right after takeoff, the opposing solo executes a classic low transition before pulling the jet into the vertical to perform an Immelman and pass back along the show line inverted. All eyes are on the solos for this one. It's an attention-grabbing tour de force to kick things off, which sets an impressive tone for the rest of the air show that will follow over the next 45 minutes. Brakes off, burners on, let's rock the show. Briefing. The section takeoff begins with both jets holding short on the taxiway to the right of the crowd, perpendicular to the runway. With the Diamonds screaming directly overhead during their half squirrel cage maneuver, the solos taxi onto the runway and line up line abreast. Once cleared for takeoff, it's throttles forward, brakes off, and burners on. While number 5 performs a dramatic, dirty roll over the runway, number 6 continues on show line in a low transition, executing a high-performance Immelman maneuver off the end of the runway. As number 5 clears behind the crowd and cleans up, number 6 continues inverted along the show line with smoke on. At the end of the runway, number 6 completes a 270-degree roll to knife edge and clears behind the crowd. Even though both pilots perform their maneuvers independently, the opposing solo has the lead during this maneuver. That means, for this 1-minute sequence, the flight is your responsibility. Fly smooth, fly consistent, keep the big picture in mind, and you'll be all set for a great air show. Let's dive into the details. Walkthrough. Hello, and welcome back to the cockpit of the FA-18C Hornet and DCS world for the Legacy Blues tutorial series. And in this video, we're going to be covering the section takeoff maneuver from the number 6 perspective. As you can see here, we are lined up holding short of the runway. And to our left, we see our number 5 jet, piloted by my solo airshow partner Chariot, which means we are ready to go flying. Now, at this point, the number 5 pilot will have just completed our pre-flight checklist, and we are ready to roll onto the runway. He will have made sure that all of our heading information is correct, that our altimeter settings are correct, that our lights are set, our smoke pressure is ready to go, that we have the correct waypoint, and then once all of that checklist information is complete, we will acknowledge that by giving our call sign, and then number 5 will say, check your parking brake off, which means that we are making sure that our parking brake down here is not engaged so we can roll. Running them up to 72%, which is the throttle percentage we want in order to get the jet to begin to roll. And we will be watching that here. Then, once we get those throttles coming forward, we will hear brakes off now. On the word now, we release our brakes. And then we will hear number 5 say our call sign detach, which means that we are free to move forward. So we'll give a little extra throttle and then we will move forward, and then number 5 will fall in line abreast behind us as we roll onto the runway. So let's watch that. On pausing, you can see we're running them up and we're rolling. Brakes are off. Number 5's falling in behind us. Because we added throttle, we'll probably need a little bit of brakes. And then we're waiting for number 5's call to come left. Common left. Okay, we're looking down the runway and we're trying to set up in the middle of this side of the runway with our nose pointed right on runway heading of 064, which is our crowd left heading and the left runway heading here at Coboletti. And then as soon as our nose is basically pointed down the runway, I'm going to look over my shoulder at number 5 and I'm going to try to maintain line abreast while he brings in the brakes, and he will give radio calls to indicate what he's doing with the brakes. He will begin with a little brakes, which means he's just starting to apply brake pressure, easy brakes, slightly more brake pressure, a little more brakes, which is, as it sounds, even more brake pressure, and then brakes, which is full brake pressure, and then on the KS, that's when we come to a full stop. So it's a way that we can break the braking sequence up into a series of steps so that we can maintain close formation even while we're taxiing. So I'm watching number 5, listening, and then brakes. There he is. All right, so we are now stopped. We are line abreast. We are pointed down the runway on basically the runway heading, and we are ready to go flying. At this point, number 5 will give a final sign off that goes something like this. Solos, we are cleared for takeoff. Maneuver our section takeoff maneuver. Then he will pause and wait for us to acknowledge with our call sign. We will do so. Then he will again remind us to check that our parking brake is not engaged so that we're free to roll. And then he will say, let's run them up, which means that we are looking to run up our throttles to 85%, which is the ideal throttle percentage in order to get the jet to begin to roll at a pretty good clip that also leaves us room to get into afterburners for our takeoff. As soon as we begin the run up, the lead actually passes over to us in the number 6 jet because we will lead the formation on this takeoff. Number 5 is performing a dirty roll, which means he will end up behind us and slower than we are. And so we will be lead because we will actually be in front of him and he will be able to maintain sight of us throughout the maneuver. So as soon as that let's run them up call goes, that means we're in charge now. So we're going to wait till our throttles increase to 85%, and then we will lead the section in the takeoff. Now, as I mentioned, number 5 is doing a different maneuver than we are on takeoff. He's doing a dirty roll, and we are performing the low transition. So our leadership basically lasts about halfway down the runway until number 5 actually takes off and begins his maneuver. But nevertheless, for that entire time, he's trying to maintain line abreast with us. And so we have to make sure that we're smooth and consistent, just like whenever we're leading a maneuver. And so that means we're going to have to also be clear in our communication. So once our throttles are powered up to 85%, I will look over my left shoulder at number 5 and I will wait for the indication that his throttles are 85 and he's ready to go. In a real blues air show, the pilots would accomplish this with a nod. We can't do that in DCS because the fidelity of the pilot model is not high enough in order to get a good nod. So what we have chosen to do is to indicate that by giving a sharp snap head movement looking toward the other pilot. And so as soon as I see his visor pointed at me, I know he's ready to go. Once I know he's ready to go, then I will begin the takeoff in a measured cadence. I will say brakes off now. On the word now, the brakes come off. I usually wait just a hair after that because there's a little bit of lag in communication over the internet, and we are flying this on public servers in a lot of cases. Then, as soon as brakes are off, in the same cadence, I will say blowers ready now. Blowers are your afterburners, and on the word now, we're shoving our throttles into stage 1 afterburner, just a little ways past the detent. That gives number 5 a little bit of room in blowers to move if he needs to stay abreast of us, but that also means that we are going to be accelerating quick enough to gain the airspeed we need to do the maneuvers we're about to do, the dirty roll and the low transition for number 5 and number 6 respectively. At that point, we are just going to be waiting until we reach 100 knots, at which point we will put the blowers into stage 3, again with the standard cadence, blowers ready now. And that call releases number 5 to perform his dirty roll on takeoff. So he is no longer a part of our section and we are free to fly our low transition, free of the responsibilities of flight leadership for the rest of this maneuver. So I'm going to unpause and we're going to watch this happen. As soon as we do the brakes off. I'm no longer watching Chariot because I want to be paying attention to my heading and make sure that I'm staying steady on the runway because he's flying off of me, so I need to be steady. So we've run up our throttles. Oh, that's something I actually forgot. I do want to talk about this. This is important. You can hear those throttles coming up, but before we get to that, I wanted to mention something that I like to do here, which is I like to set a course line so that I have in my HSI the heading for the show line at all times. You can see the line here in the left MFD on the HSI page. This line here is the show line. And in order to set that, I will hold this course switch, either right or left, and hold it down until I see these letters, CSEL, C-cell, which is course select. Once I see that, I am free to punch in the course I want on the numpad here. So here at Coboletti, I can either do 064 for the crowd left heading or the reciprocal 244 for the crowd right heading. Either way, it still works to give me a good solid course line so that I have some additional SA and it helps for later on in the show for some of the maneuvers that we lead. The reason why I do this on the runway is because if you do this on the taxiway, you'll actually lose that course line and it will not reappear and you will have to redesignate and reset it. So I wait until we are stopped on the runway and I do that while Chariot is doing his very final pre-flight communication. So that course line is set. We're running up our throttles to 85. And there we go, we're at 85. Look over at Chariot. Chariot's ready to go. He's looking at me. Brakes off now. Blowers ready now. We're looking forward and we're just trying to stay steady on the runway. I'm going to slow things down because things come real fast. And then once we reach 100 knots, blowers ready now. Shove it into stage 3. And now we're looking for about 140 knots and then we're going to begin feeding in back pressure to bring the nose up and get the jet off the ground. Chariot is free to take off, so he's going to begin his dirty roll. There he goes. And you can see right here, I'm going to pause, we are airborne. How do I know that we're airborne? Well, there's a little bit of a roll, so that means we're probably not on all 3 wheels. But in addition to that, this AOA indicator here is lit up. That will only light up when their weight is off of the wheels. So I wait until I see this AOA indicator light up before I throw my gear switch up and try and get the landing gear to retract. Because for a low transition, we're trying to stay as low to the ground as we possibly can while we're taking off. So we want to get the wheels just far enough off the ground so that we can retract them, but stay straight and level while we increase speed. But the landing gear will not retract unless the weight are off wheels, so we have to wait for that AO indicator to light up, then we can throw the gear. Now we're in the air, the gear's coming up, we're going to throw our flaps into auto, and now we are going to just continue to accelerate down the runway on runway crowd left heading until we reach the speed of 320 knots, and then we will begin an Immelman maneuver. You're going to need some forward pressure here in order to neutralize because the jet just wants to fly and it'll want to climb. Get set on the horizon and then we're just watching the speed build until we hit 320 knots. At 300 knots, I will begin a radio call to indicate to the rest of our team, which includes our fellow solo pilot, that I'm about to perform an aerobatic maneuver. This is important because number 5 is currently completing a dirty roll, which is a very difficult maneuver, and he's slow and behind us. So we're going to be pulling up into the sky directly in front of him. And so he needs to be prepared that we're about to do that so that if it is necessary, he can deconflict. Because we don't have sight of him, he has sight of us. So we need to be clear in our communication to let him know we're about to go aerobatic. So ready, hit it. And then we're going to give about 90% back pressure and then full back pressure and pull into the sky, 6G climb, and then we're going to ease it off to about 4Gs as we pass through vertical. And then we're going to maintain about 4 Gs over the top. And then as we pass through about 45, we're going to ease off those Gs so that we can catch the jet inverted here to complete our Immelman. Catching it inverted, now full forward pressure to catch it, and then easing that pressure off, And then once we are inverted and we're settled, we're going to be sighting the runway. And I actually will begin to look for the runway at about the vertical, at the 90 straight up and down, so that way I can maintain a good heading as you come over the top. If you don't check that earlier, you might end up rolling or pulling or completing your Immelmann slightly askew from the runway, and that's not what you want to do. And you especially don't want to crowd violate. You don't want to fly over this portion of the runway where the crowd would be, because that is dangerous, and we throughout the show are avoiding any maneuvers that would take us over the crowd, especially when we're flying in an aerobatic manner. So now that we are stabilized, we're on the reciprocal heading of the runway, and we're inverted, then I will give the radio call, blowers ready now, which is the call that I'm coming out of afterburner, and I will be putting smoke on. Now in DCS, it does not model that our afterburners have the ability to burn the smoke and make it so that you can't see it. Number 5 and number 6 both turn smoke on the runway and complete this maneuver with smoke on, and you just can't see it for number 6 because he's using afterburner as he goes over the top. DCS, we can't do that, so we have to turn smoke on when you would begin to see it, and that is right here when we get inverted. So burners ready now, smoke on, and then we just maintain inverted flight flying along the runway heading. I will speed up again, and you're going to use a combination of rudder and roll in order to stay in the middle of the runway. And then right around here, we're going to get ready to roll out. We're going to do a right-hand 270-degree roll to knife edge, and then we're going to clear behind the crowd to complete the maneuver. Usually before I give the call that I'm going to clear, I will say smoke off when I reach the end of the runway, because we're going to clear after we cross over the end of the runway. So I will say smoke off, which is a good indication to the rest of the team that I have completed my inverted flight over the runway. And then once I have rolled all the way to the 90 and I'm pulling behind the crowd, I will call clear to indicate I am now clear of the show box and it is free for the diamond to come in for their next maneuver. So smoke off, rolling out to the knife edge, clear, and we're behind the crowd. And when I come behind the crowd, I'm looking for a heading of roughly 45-degree offset from the show line. So if our crowd right heading is 244, then anything between 284 and 290 is a pretty good heading. And the reason why we do that is because we need to be behind the crowd so we're not visible to them. And also we need to set up a lateral offset from the show line, because the next maneuver, we need to come back in along the show line the opposite direction for the knife edge pass. It's going to be really hard to get a good turn in if we're staying right on the show line, and so we set up a little bit of lateral separation in order to give us some turning room so we can come straight back in for center point. So that is the whole of the section takeoff from the number 6 perspective. It's really not that difficult. There's a little bit of fine detail and motor skills and coordination that you're going to need in order to get a good low transition. So I would encourage you to practice that. You may need to drill it a little bit, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too hard. And then an Immelmann is very straightforward, and an inverted flight is something that you're going to be doing throughout the show. And so it's good to get some practice in for that. And it's a great way to practice because you have a nice straight line of a runway in order to practice flying straight, level, in an inverted flight. So this is a good warm up for the show. It sets the tone for the rest of the show. It's impressive from the crowd's perspective, and so it's worth taking the time to get it right. And when you get it right, it's a real eye-opener, and it really starts the show off with a bang. Demo. Let's look at an example of the section takeoff maneuver from an air show that we performed at Kobyleti Airfield on the Caucasus map in DCS. This air show is far from perfect, but it's a great demonstration of the maneuvers that we're going to teach you in each of these videos performed in real time with full comms. Let's check it out.
Coming right for lineup. Okay. Easing power idle. A little brakes. Easy brakes. A little brakes. Brakes.
Solos, we're clear for takeoff. Check your parking brakes off. Maneuver, our section takeoff maneuver.
Lamp.
Check your parking brakes off. Let's run them up.
Brakes off now. Blowers ready now. Blowers ready now.
See ya.
Ready, hit it.
Turn clear. Check lights.
Lep. Wings level, blowers ready now. Smoke on. Smoke off. Clear. State 99.
Turret's clear. 2 miles. State 10.
1.5.
And that's how the Legacy Blue Solos performed the Section Takeoff. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel, where you can find the rest of the Legacy Blue Solos tutorial series, as well as full side-by-side show sequences and debriefs. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the flight line.